Welcome to a new daily top Askreddit video. Today's topic: what's a video game you enjoyed that most people disliked? Anyone remember True Crime, Streets of La? It seemed like a very love or hate game and I absolutely loved it. I liked how the story would branch out depending on what you did in certain missions. The martial arts were fun too. I remember the gun combat feeling kind of flat though. You have the right to soak in your own urine. Yeah, the gunplay was a little arcadey, and all I really appreciated was blowing away a fleeing suspect in slow motion. Good fights though. Check out Sleeping Dogs if you liked that. I5K Sleeping Dogs was initially supposed to be a sequel to True Crime. The first Watch Dogs. Maybe it wasn't everything they promised, but it was still a pretty good game. Best gunplay of the entire franchise. It feels too weird killing everyone as Marcus in the second game. And you weren't supposed to identify with Aiden, dude was messed up. T-Bone was a way more likeable protagonist. Plus the missions against default were the best in the series. Ash, I'm kinda lost here, isn't the Watch Dogs protagonist's name Aiden? Spore. Granted, I wasn't aware of the game till after it released, so I didn't know about all the hype and high expectations other people had. It has its issues, but it's still quite fun and sunk many hours into it. Spore is a great game, it's just weighed by the fact that if EA didn't cut production when it was 70% finished, it could have been a fantastic game. Also, the DRM at the time caused a lot of outrage. You have to have an internet connection to install. Limited number of installs. But games today basically sell our info to the highest bidder. I loved the first two stages, and had varying levels of enjoyment of the rest, but was disappointed by a lot of things. I was disappointed that it feels like you just stop evolving so early on. I was disappointed about how short and shallow the tribe and city stages were, like you were being rushed onto space. I was disappointed with how it was like the game was actively trying to prevent you from having fun in space by interrupting you every 10 seconds with some hazard or attack busy work that needed to be taken care of. It was a game with a lot of potential, but it just didn't come together right. Totally with you, especially the city/tribe stuff. It just felt so underdeveloped that it might as well have not been included in the game. Mercenaries 2 for PS3. I loved that game, played through it 3x. Terrible online reviews, and if you didn't update the game would freeze forever. The original Mercenaries was one of the most fun games I've ever played. It's probably nostalgic, but I fucking loved Mercenaries. Dynasty Warriors. People give me shit all the time for liking DW like you just mash one button. I guess if you went it thinking it was gonna be tech, I could see how you might be disappointed, but if you go in expecting Double Dragon, it's great. It's cheesy and campy, and the 1vs100 gameplay is super fun. Dynasty Warriors on PS2 was my jam. I replayed the campaign so many times just to try all the heroes. Dynasty Warriors 4 was the best. I still think about Lu Bu as one of the scariest boss fights from my childhood. Not necessarily toughest, but scariest, because when that man was on the screen, your life could be ending very soon. And sometimes you'd try to flee and look back over your shoulder just to see him relentlessly pursuing. I probably set a heart rate record for my young life up until that point. Me and my friends used to have an inside joke where we'd say, "Oh shit, it's Lu Bu. Dude, Dynasty Warriors is my go-to for brain-off gaming. Like, I've had a shit day, I just want to wipe out a bunch of mooks as Lu Fucky Boo. It's great." The Godfather. You couldn't tell me I wasn't a mob boss. What wasn't there to like? It was a GTA clone with the Corleone family. My ex thought it was corny, but I was obsessed. That and La Noire. I wish I had the time to play those again. Turok, that late 2000 remake. I'm no longer alone. You talking about the 2008 one where you're part of Whiskey Company? I'm not sure what people dislike about it, but since there hasn't been a next one, but clearly it didn't do well. The early 2000 one, Evolution, was busted, nearly impossible without cheats, a storyline that made no sense, and horrendous voiceovers. That one is still one of my favorites. Evolution is the only Turok game I've ever played and I fucking loved it. That gun that drilled multiple little holes in people was gruesome lol, and the black hole device was pretty interesting. Glad to know it wasn't just me that couldn't follow the story though. I seem to remember it ending on some weird-ass cliffhanger with some dude putting on war paint or some shit, like he was gonna be the final boss, and then nope, that was just the end. BioShock 2. I know people don't consider the story to be as impactful as the first one, but the gameplay is way more polished. Also, I get to use a fucky drill as a weapon. That is sweet. I was a little taken aback by the amount of hate Infinite got too, even though I thought it was a lot of fun. Didn't Infinite get like straight 2010s, win Game of the Year, and was generally beloved? Cause that was my experience with it, and I gotta say it's still one of my top 10 stories in gaming. I'm with you. Just replayed them both again as part of the remastered collection, and 2 has so many quality of life changes over the first one, and the story is still good. Especially if you include Minerva's Den, which I think may have been my favorite part of the series. Not sure if it's really hated, but Star Fox Adventures could be considered the black sheep of its series. Is it a good Star Fox game? No, since you're almost never in the AWIG. But damn, is it a good furry Zelda clone? Still one of my favorite games all these years later. There's just something super charming about it. I can still hear that shopkeeper screaming, "You don't have enough scarabs." No, that's too low. COD Ghosts. Fun game. Like, shitty, but fun. Awesome story. Fun multiplayer with the addition of the Predator and Michael Myers. Infection, or whatever the alien mode was a fun take on the Horde mode that COD often has. I think the game just came out too early. It was ahead of its time, and that's why it flopped. One of the only early games I didn't really mind the microtransactions on, besides the guns that you could only buy, not unlock. Same goes for the A4. Hearing Snoop Dogg talk shit was fun. I used to think people were only joking about how bad they thought it was. I actually really enjoyed that game. The campaign was maybe in the top 5, the multiplayer was fun, the guns were interesting, and the customized RTO was a vast improvement over its predecessors. I think my favorite part was that it was like Argentina was the bad guy. Fucking loved it, not Russia / generic Muslim nation. Shadow the Hedgehog. Don't get me wrong, that game has issues, but overall I still had fun with it and would love to see a sequel that learns from the mistakes of the first game. I want a re-release on Steam like most of the other Sonic games. Same, would also like to see it added to the Xbox backwards compatibility program along with Sonic Heroes, but Sega wants to pretend those games don't exist. As a kid I wasn't allowed to play games with guns. Shadow was the one exception, so it was the coolest crap ever. Then I found out it had swears, another no-no. So to make sure it was never banned, I played the whole game on volume 0 straight up. I loved Shadow, haha. As a kid I wasn't allowed to play games with guns. Shadow was the one exception, so it was the coolest crap ever. Then I found out it had swears, another no-no. Me too. And I was like 11 when it came out. Either way, it was by far the most violent, edgiest game of my life to that point. Fallout 4. Yeah, dialogue trees weren't as varied as the predecessors, but the game was fantastic. My melee playthrough is one of the stupidest and most enjoyable RPG experiences I have ever had. Opening up the skill tree to where you could, with enough time, fully complete it gave so much more freedom to experiment on the fly. The base building was a novel idea that would have been 1000x better if you could let your settlements naturally develop instead of micromanaging an entire map. It gets so much hate and I simply don't get why. If you're playing on PC, there's a really excellent mod called Sim Settlements where you just have to place lots and the settlers do the building for you. It's not exactly automated settlements, but it made the game much more enjoyable for me. The structures all vary and upgrade on their own, there's a lot of personality in the details, too. Update, Sim Settlements 2 released with a storyline and the ability to hand over the reins of settlement development to settler or companion. Been playing around with it and it improves the settlement building so much, highly recommend. I very much enjoyed F4. The gunplay was polished. And I spent way too much time building up my settlements, only to realize I never really needed to. Incredible game. The Yuka-Cola expansion was amazing, too. I just wish they had more options when it came to the raiders. Star Wars Battlefront 2. It was so panned for its greedy microtransactions I never even considered buying it. I downloaded it on Xbox Gamers Pass a few months ago and it's so much fun. It reminded me of the old ones, which I honestly think is all anybody ever wanted. They obviously put some work in to fix their old mistakes. Too bad. If they had just come out with the product they have now, it would have probably been an instant classic. It's sad how many of the games in this thread could have been fan favorites if they hadn't been rushed and / or had microtransactions forced in. You'd think the greedy asses would learn to stop pushing the developers so much, but they are still doing exactly what they've been doing for decades. Learn from what? Greedy microtransactions make bank. My son got into with his friends a few months back, and they loved it. They were so excited playing as all these iconic Star Wars characters, getting new skins, unlocking whatever it was they unlocked. They'd have had a real hit if they'd just launched that game instead of the microtransaction-focused one they initially released.